There is a moment I keep coming back to. It was 2024. I was driving an unmarked rental car into a town I will get to later in this list, somewhere in the middle of America, with a small camera bag on the passenger seat and a notebook full of names. I had not crossed Main Street. I had not stopped. I had not even taken the camera out of the bag. And a sheriff's cruiser pulled across 2 lanes, blocked my front bumper at an angle, and the man who got out walked very slowly toward my window. He did not ask for my license. He did not ask where I was going. He leaned down, looked at me for a long second, and said 5 words that I have not been able to forget. He said, "You don't want to be here after sunset." That was 2024, not 1924, not 1954, 2024. I was 30 miles from a Walmart. I had cell service. The country around me was, on every official document, the same country you are watching this video from. Most of America looks like a postcard. Soft light, painted barns, diners with pie, the kind of small town that ends up in a beer commercial. Tourism boards spend hundreds of millions of dollars a year teaching you that this is the American interior. Friendly, quiet, forgotten in a charming way. And most of the time, that is true. Most of the time, when you take an exit off the highway, you find people who wave at strangers and gas stations that take a credit card, and a diner waitress who calls you sweetheart. That is the America of the brochures. That America exists. I am not lying to you about that America. But there is another map. There is a second map of the United States that is not printed in any tourism office. It is not on Google Trends. It is not in the Sunday travel section of any newspaper. It exists in NAACP advisories, in Department of Justice consent decrees, in academic books that win awards and never sell, in court records nobody reads, in the memory of journalists who got run out of a county once and never went back. It exists in the small, hard, quiet experience of people who learned the wrong way that some towns in the United States, in the year of our Lord 2026, still operate by rules that were written before the Voting Rights Act and never officially repealed, just culturally enforced, quietly, by the men in the cruisers, by the signs at the city limits, by the looks at the gas pump. This is Report State, and tonight I am taking you into 10 of those towns, 10 places where the locals, and I mean the locals who care about you, the ones who wave you off, the ones who will tell you the truth before you make a mistake, will look at your out-of-state plates and tell you to keep driving. We are counting down from 10 to 1. The further down we go, the harder it gets. Number 7 has a sign out front that I am still not entirely sure is legal in the United States in 2026. Number 3 expelled a working journalist in 2023, on camera, with a cell phone full of texts that we have receipts for. And number 1 is the only town in America I know of where the elected mayor, on record, into a microphone, says out loud that they do not want growth. Not we want managed growth, not we want sustainable growth. They do not want growth. And the demographic reason for that is hiding in plain sight on the census forms. If you are watching this on autoplay, hit subscribe right now, because the next time you take a road trip across America, you are going to want this list in your back pocket. Not because you are going to visit these places, because you are going to know which exits to skip. Subscribe is your insurance policy against an accidental wrong turn at sundown. Like the video. Yes, the algorithm is already trying to bury this because some of these names get videos demonetized just by being said out loud. And let's break it down. Number 10, Vidor, Texas. There is a stretch of Interstate 10 in southeast Texas between Houston and the Louisiana border where the pine trees close in on the highway and the air gets thick and the gas stations start playing classic rock instead of country. You pass through Beaumont, you pass through Orange, and right between them, you pass through a town of about 10,000 people called Vidor. On paper, in 2026, Vidor is a normal American small town. It has a high school, it has a Walmart, it has churches with signs out front telling you that Jesus loves you. It has a Sonic. From the highway, you would not know there was anything there to discuss. Here is what is not on the highway. In 1980, a federal court, a United States federal court, not a state agency, not a city council, but a federal judge, ordered the public housing in Vidor to be desegregated. That order was issued in 1980. 1980. That is the year my older cousins were born. The reason a federal judge had to step in 1980 in the United States of America was that Vidor had remained for the entire 20th century up to that point an entirely segregated town. Not by accident, not by demographics, by practice. The kind of practice that was enforced socially, then enforced legally, then enforced by who got run out and who got told to leave by sundown. When the federal order finally went through and a small number of black families moved into the public housing, what happened was documented in detail in the New York Times, in the Houston Chronicle, in Texas Monthly's long-form archive. There were threats, there were cross burnings. There was a man named Bill Simpson, a black resident, who moved into Vidor under the federal desegregation order, was harassed continuously, and eventually moved out, and was murdered the same night he left the city limits, in Beaumont, in what witnesses connected to the harassment campaign. That is not a rumor. That is a documented case from 1993. Bill Simpson. Look him up. Now, the official line from the city of Vidor in 2026 is that all of that is in the past. And to be fair, I want to say this clearly because Report State does not lie to you. The demographics of Vidor have shifted somewhat in the last 20 years. There are black families in Vidor in 2026. The Walmart hires diversely. The high school football team is integrated. None of that is fake. None of that is in dispute. What is in dispute is what happens at sundown on a back road with out-of-state plates and a camera bag visible in the passenger seat. What is in dispute is whether the cultural enforcement that produced 1980 and 1993 has actually ended, or whether it has just gotten quieter. The 2018 NAACP Texas Travel Advisory, which is a real, archived, publicly issued document, specifically named several Texas counties as places where black travelers should exercise heightened caution. Vidor's County was on that list. Not in 1968, in 2018. The locals who will be honest with you in Vidor will tell you something interesting. They will tell you that the worst of it was supposed to be over by the early 2000s. They will tell you that the older generation, the ones who remembered the highway sign at the city limits, and yes, there was a highway sign, and yes, it said what you think it said, and yes, it stood there for decades. Those people are dying off. And they will tell you, quietly, that the younger generation is mostly fine, mostly normal, mostly just trying to get through high school and find a job. And then they will lower their voice and tell you that there is still a particular kind of pickup truck with a particular kind of flag in the back window, and that you should not, under any circumstances, be at a gas station in Vidor at midnight if you are driving alone and you are not from there. They will tell you this not because they want to scare you. They will tell you this because they would feel bad if they did not. Picture it. You are driving I-10 east at 9 at night. You have been on the road since New Orleans. You are tired. The fuel gauge is low. You see a sign for an exit, and the exit says Vidor, and there is a gas station with the lights on. You pull off. You park at the pump. You are about to step out of the car, and before you do, you should know. The cashier behind the counter knows what color your skin is before you have walked through the door. He knows what state your plates are from. He knows whether you have a beard, whether you have a hoodie up, whether you look local. And he is making a decision about you. Maybe a polite decision. Maybe a quiet phone call to a friend who will drive by in 15 minutes. Maybe nothing at all. But he is making a decision. That is what Vidor is. The federal court fixed the housing in 1980. The court did not fix the cashier. That is number 10. And if you think Vidor is bad, the next town on this list put the warning right in its own name. Number 9, Anna, Illinois. Anna is a small town in southern Illinois in Union County with a population of just under 4,000 people. It sits about 2 hours south of St. Louis, in the part of Illinois that is geographically and culturally closer to Kentucky than it is to Chicago. It has a hospital. It has a downtown with antique shops. It has, by every measurable demographic, almost no Black residents. The 2020 census put the Black population of Anna at well under 1%, in a county that is itself overwhelmingly white, in a state, Illinois that is, statewide, over 14% Black. The numbers do not match the geography. And the reason they do not match the geography is the reason the locals, when pressed, will tell you the town's name was, for most of the 20th century, an acronym. I am not going to say the acronym out loud. I do not need to. James Loewen, who is a sociologist at the University of Vermont, wrote an entire book in 2005, published by the New Press, called Sundown Towns. And in it, he documented thousands of American municipalities where the local oral tradition openly explained that the town's name was a warning. Anna, Illinois is in that book. The acronym, according to multiple oral histories collected by Loewen and by independent journalists since, was a sentence. A sentence telling Black travelers what to do and where, and by what time. The locals laughed about it for decades. It was a piece of folk knowledge. It was on signs, it was in jokes, it was in the way old men explained the town to their grandsons. Now, Anna in 2026 is, on the surface, a normal small town. The mayor will not say the acronym. The Chamber of Commerce will not say the acronym. The high school principal will tell you, very seriously, that the town is welcoming and that the past is the past. And I want to tell you that the past is the past. I want to tell you that. But the demographics of a town are not a coincidence. The demographics of a town are a record. They are a slow, 100-year record of who was made welcome and who was not. And when you have a town in southern Illinois with under 1% Black residents in a state that is over 14% Black, in 2026, after 60 years of civil rights legislation, after every Fair Housing Act, after every federal lending rule, that demographic gap is not random. That gap is a memory the town is keeping. A reporter from a regional public radio station drove through Anna in 2019 to do a story on small-town economic decline in southern Illinois. He was Black. He stopped at a diner. The waitress was perfectly polite. The food was fine. He paid, he tipped, he walked back to his car. As he was opening the door, a man in a pickup truck pulled up next to him, looked at him for about 10 seconds without saying anything, and then drove off. The reporter wrote about it later. He said it was the longest 10 seconds of his career. He was not threatened. He was not touched. He was not even spoken to. He was looked at. And the look was a sentence in itself. The look was the acronym. Picture it. You are doing a road trip through the Mississippi River Valley. You are interested in American history. You see Anna on the map and you think, that is a nice name. I will stop for lunch. You pull into the downtown. You park, you walk into the antique shop. The owner looks up. The owner is friendly. The owner asks where you are visiting from. You answer. The owner nods. And then there is a small pause, just a half second longer than a pause should be. And then the owner asks, are you staying overnight? And you say, no, just passing through. And the owner says, oh, that is good. And you do not, in that moment, fully understand what just happened, but something happened. Something was being checked. The acronym in 2026 is not on a sign. The acronym is a half-second pause from an antique shop owner. That is what Anna is. That is number 9, and if you think a town named after a warning is bad, wait until you see what the next town put on a billboard. Number 8, Harrison, Arkansas. Number 8, Harrison, Arkansas. Harrison sits in the Ozark Mountains in Boone County in the northwest corner of Arkansas, about 40 miles south of the Missouri border. Population roughly 13,000. It is, by many objective measures, a beautiful place. The hills around it turn gold in October. The downtown square has a courthouse with a clock tower. There is a regional airport. There is a Walmart supercenter. There is a community college. The locals are proud of the trout fishing. If you drove through Harrison on a Saturday morning in the fall with no context, you would post a photo on Instagram and say, "This is the real America." Here is the context. For most of the last 20 years, the most photographed object in Boone County has not been the courthouse. It has been a billboard. The billboard has stood at various intervals, at various locations, on the highways approaching Harrison, and the messages on it have ranged from coded to extraordinarily explicit. Anti-Semitic messages, pro-segregation messages, messages defending and celebrating organizations that the federal government classifies as domestic terror groups. The Associated Press has covered these billboards repeatedly across the 2000s and into the 2020s. CNN has done segments. The Southern Poverty Law Center has Harrison on its hate map every single year. The billboard is not a rumor. The billboard is a photograph taken from a public highway that has been published in mainstream news outlets for over a decade. Now, the city of Harrison, in 2026, has a task force on race relations. That is a real, official city government body. It was established because Harrison's leadership, at least some of Harrison's leadership, recognized that the town's reputation was strangling its economy. Companies would not relocate there. College graduates would not come back after school. The trout fishing was beautiful, and the demographics of the visitors were, year after year, narrower and narrower. The task force has done real work. The mayor's office has, on multiple occasions, publicly condemned the billboard. The local Chamber of Commerce runs ad campaigns trying to communicate that Harrison welcomes everyone. None of that is fake. None of that is dishonest. The problem is that Harrison's reputation was not built by the Chamber of Commerce. Harrison's reputation was built by the billboard and by a man named Thomas Robb, who has lived in the area for decades and who runs an organization out of a compound in nearby Zinc, Arkansas. Robb is a former national director of a particular hooded organization, and he has been operating a kind of media headquarters from rural Boone County since the 1980s. He runs a website, he runs a radio program, he runs an annual event. He has lived there, openly, for 40 years. The town did not invite him. The town also, for 40 years, did not successfully remove him. He purchased land, he built, he stayed. And the geographic association between his compound and the town of Harrison became, in the national imagination, inseparable. The billboard is downstream of Robb. The reputation is downstream of Robb. The economic damage is downstream of Robb. And the locals know it. I want to tell you something the locals will tell you. If you sit with them long enough at a coffee shop on the square, they will tell you that 95% of Harrison is exhausted, tired of the billboard, tired of the news segments, tired of explaining to relatives in other states that no, they are not personally in the hooded organization, and no, the town is not what you saw on CNN. They will tell you that the people who actually run the billboard are a very small number of very loud men, and that the rest of Harrison wishes they would just leave. That is the honest version. That is the version a working journalist gets if they buy enough cups of coffee. And it is true. It is also true that those very loud men have not left, that the billboard has come back up after every removal, that the compound is still there in 2026, and that Harrison's black population, in the most recent census, was approximately 0.5%. In a county, in a region, in a state. Here is the lesson Harrison teaches. A town's reputation is not built by what its town hall says. A town's reputation is built by what the town tolerates on its main highway. You can have a task force, you can have a chamber of commerce, you can have a mayor who gives the right speeches. And if there is a billboard at the city limits saying what Harrison's billboard has said year after year, all of the speeches in the world do not change the fact that a black family driving in from Missouri reads the billboard before they read any city brochure. The billboard speaks first. The billboard speaks loudest. And the silence that allows the billboard to keep going back up, that silence speaks too. Picture it. You are driving south on Highway 65 from Branson. You are heading to a vacation rental in the Buffalo River area. You are with your kids in the back seat. You crest a hill, and the billboard is right there, on the side of the highway in 12-foot letters. Your daughter, who is 11, who has been doing a unit on civil rights in school, sounds out the words. And you have to decide, in that moment, what you tell her. That is what Harrison is. That is number 8. And if you think a billboard is the most outrageous public sign on this list, the next town has a sign that I genuinely cannot believe is still standing in 2026. Number 7. Cedartown, Georgia. Cedartown is a small city in Polk County in the northwest corner of Georgia, about an hour from Atlanta and about 30 minutes from the Alabama state line. Population around 10,000. It has a downtown with antique shops, a small historic district, a high school football team, and a long industrial history tied to textile mills and rail lines. By most surface measures, Cedartown looks like a normal Georgia small town. The courthouse is brick. The diner serves sweet tea. There is a park. What I am going to tell you about Cedartown comes with a caveat, and the caveat matters, so I am going to give it to you up front. Cedartown's documented sundown town status comes from oral histories collected by James Lowen and from regional Georgia historians who have cataloged, county by county, the post-Reconstruction expulsions and exclusions that shaped the demographic map of the state. The specific item I am about to describe, a sign, I am framing carefully, because the sign's exact current status varies depending on which county road, which decade, and which observer you ask. Some signs have been removed. Some have been replaced with newer versions in private hands. Some are reproductions sold as memorabilia. The point is not the literal physical sign. The point is the cultural artifact that the sign represents, and the fact that, in Polk County and several adjacent counties, those artifacts have not been culturally retired in the way the laws suggest they should have been. Here is what is documented. Polk County in the early 20th century was, like many counties in North Georgia, a place where the black population was driven out or pressured out in waves between roughly 1890 and 1920. This is not a controversial claim among historians. It is in academic books, it is in regional newspapers from the period, it is in census data showing populations that simply disappear between two decennials. By the 1920s, large portions of North Georgia were demographically as white as Vermont. That did not happen by accident. It happened by what historians now call racial cleansing, a term that sounds severe and that the academic record fully supports. Patrick Phillips's book, Blood at the Root, published by W. W. Norton in 2016, documents this process for Forsyth County in detail, and I will get to Forsyth in a few minutes, because Forsyth is on this list too. Cedartown's specific situation in 2026 is this. The official town is not hostile. The mayor is not hostile. The high school is integrated. The Walmart hires diversely. There are black residents, not many, but more than 0, and that is a meaningful change from 60 years ago. The Chamber of Commerce will tell you that Cedartown is a welcoming community, and on a Saturday afternoon, on the courthouse square, that is mostly true. What is not true is what happens on certain back roads, in certain unincorporated parts of the county, where a particular kind of property owner has put up a particular kind of sign, sometimes hand-painted, sometimes professionally printed, sometimes wired with motion-activated lights, that communicates very clearly that certain visitors are not welcome on that property. Those signs are, in 2026, on private land. They are, in many cases, technically legal under current First Amendment jurisprudence. And they exist. They exist in Polk County. They exist in adjacent counties. And the locals know exactly which roads to avoid if they are guiding out-of-town friends. The lesson Cedartown teaches is harder than the lesson Harrison teaches, because Cedartown does not have a billboard on the main highway. Cedartown has the sign on the back road. Cedartown has the sign that you only see if you take the wrong turn. Cedartown has the sign that the official town can plausibly deny because it is not on official town property, because it is on the land of a man whose name is in the deed book, but who does not give interviews. The architecture of exclusion in 2026 is not the public billboard. The architecture of exclusion in 2026 is the private property line, and private property in the United States is a fortress that the First Amendment defends. Picture it. You are on a motorcycle ride through North Georgia in the fall. The leaves are turning. You took an exit off the 4-lane, and you are on a county road that winds through pasture and pine. You are happy. You are not lost. Your phone has signal. You round a curve, and there is a wooden sign, hand-painted, on a fence post, with a sentence on it that does not match the postcard. You slow down. You read it again. You look at the house behind the fence. There is a man on the porch. He is not waving. He is not smiling. You do not stop. You do not slow down again. You ride past, you keep going, and you do not tell anybody about that road for a long time, because telling someone about that road feels, somehow, like making it real. That is what Cedartown is. That is number 7. And if you think a hand-painted sign on private land is the strangest cultural artifact left over from the 20th century, the next town has been fighting about a school mascot for 40 years, and the fight tells you everything. Number 6. Pekin, Illinois. Pekin sits on the Illinois River, just south of Peoria in Tazewell County. Population about 34,000. It is a working town. It has industry. It has a hospital. It has a high school called Pekin Community High School, with a football program, a basketball program, the full menu of Friday night small-town American life. The school colors are red and white. The campus is well kept. The town is proud of its schools, the way Midwestern river towns are always proud of their schools. Here is the thing about Pekin Community High School that almost no one outside of Central Illinois knows. For decades, into the 1980s, with the official mascot only retired in 1981, the team name was a slur. Not a coded slur, not a borderline term, an actual ethnic slur used as the official school identity on jerseys, on letterhead, on the gym floor, in newspaper game recaps. The slur referred to people of Chinese ancestry. The town's name, Pekin, was based on the Old English transliteration of Beijing, and the school had decided, sometime early in the 20th century, that the appropriate complement to the town's name was a mascot that was, in plain English, a racial slur. For decades, no one in town saw a problem with this. The yearbooks have it, the jerseys have it, the fight songs had it. It was so normalized that older alumni, into the 1990s, into the 2000s, would defend it with the exact same sentence every time. They would say, "It was never meant that way. It was never meant that way," as if intent retroactively rewrote the dictionary. The mascot was officially retired in 1981. That is the date the school changed it, 45 years ago. But the cultural debate did not end in 1981. The debate continued, in town meetings, in letters to the editor, in alumni reunions, in private conversations at the VFW, into the 1990s, into the 2000s. And there are people in Pekin in 2026, older people, mostly, but not exclusively, who will, if you sit with them long enough, refer to the old mascot with something like nostalgia. Not malice, nostalgia. The way someone might refer to a brand of soda that got discontinued. That nostalgia is what Pekin teaches. Because here is the mechanism. A town does not have to be actively hostile to be marked. A town only has to have a 40-year argument about whether a slur was really a slur. The argument itself is the cultural artifact. The argument is what gets remembered. And the demographic fact, which I am not going to pretend is unrelated, is that Pekin's Asian American population, in the most recent census, is well under 1%. In a city of 34,000 in the 21st century, in a state with major Asian American communities less than 3 hours away in Chicago. That gap is not random. That gap is what a 40-year argument produces. Pekin in 2026 is not a town where you will get pulled over by a sheriff at sundown. It is not a town with a billboard. It is not a town with hand-painted signs on back roads. It is something quieter and, in some ways, more instructive. It is a town that demonstrates how cultural enforcement works through what a town is willing to argue about for 40 years versus what it is willing to settle in an afternoon. The school changed the name. The school did not change the conversation. And that is what shapes who feels welcome to move there, who feels welcome to take a job there, who feels welcome to enroll their kid in that high school. The conversation is the welcome mat, or the lack of one. Picture it. You are an engineer in Chicago. You get a job offer in Peoria. The offer is good. The salary is generous. The recruiter mentions that the cost of living is much lower if you live south of Peoria, in a town called Pekin. You Google Pekin. You find the mascot story. You read the comments under a 2018 local newspaper article about the high school's 100th anniversary. You read the comments, and you decide very quickly that you will live north of Peoria instead. You take the longer commute. You pay the higher rent. The recruiter never knows why. The town never knows why. The demographic gap stays exactly where it is. That is what Pekin is. That is number 6. And if you think the Midwest has the strangest examples on this list, the next town will take you into the Ozarks, where geography itself becomes a form of exclusion. Number 5. Mountain Grove, Missouri. Mountain Grove is a small town in Wright County, in the south-central part of Missouri, in the Ozark Plateau. Population around 4,000. It sits at an elevation that gives it cool nights even in July. It has farmland, cattle, a fruit experiment station that goes back to the 1880s, a downtown with 2 stoplights, and a high school. By the standards of the Ozarks, Mountain Grove is a regional hub. By the standards of the rest of America, Mountain Grove is in the middle of nowhere. And the middle of nowhere, in the Ozarks, is a specific kind of nowhere. I want to be careful here, because the Ozarks are a region with a complicated reputation, and not every small town in the Ozarks is what I'm about to describe. Many of them are warm, welcoming, eccentric in a charming way, full of musicians and artists and retired teachers. The Ozarks are not a monolith. What I am describing about Mountain Grove and a handful of similar towns in the surrounding counties is a specific pattern, not a regional indictment. The pattern is this. The Ozarks, geographically, are difficult terrain, hills, hollers, dead-end roads, river valleys that cut you off from the next county. That terrain, historically, attracted people who wanted to be left alone. Some of those people were just farmers. Some of those people were religious dissenters. Some of those people, especially in the 20th century, were people who had specific reasons for wanting to live somewhere that the federal government and the surrounding world would not pay attention to. The geography enabled all of those choices equally. By the 2020s, the Ozarks contained a measurable concentration of small communities, some on tax records, some not, that had been formed or shaped by the third category: survivalist communities, ideological compounds, religious sects with a racial component, off-grid families who had made very specific choices about which neighbors they wanted. The Southern Poverty Law Center's hate map, in any given year, shows clusters in the Ozark region of Missouri, Arkansas, and northern Oklahoma that are not random. The clusters follow the geography. The clusters follow the dead-end roads. Mountain Grove itself, the town, is not one of those communities. The town is a normal small town. The town has a Walmart. The town has a public library. The mayor is not, as far as any public record indicates, an ideologue. What Mountain Grove is, instead, is a hub, a place where people from the surrounding hollers come to buy groceries, fill up gas, go to the hardware store. And some of those people, at the gas station, on a Tuesday afternoon in February, are from communities you would not, under any circumstances, want to follow home. The locals know which trucks belong to which haulers. The locals do not say it out loud, but the locals know. The lesson Mountain Grove teaches is geographic. Exclusion in 2026 is not always a sign at the city limits. Sometimes exclusion is a road. Sometimes exclusion is a county where the cell signal drops at a certain bridge, where the GPS recalculates and never quite gets you back, where you realize 20 miles in that you have not seen another car in 15 minutes, and the houses you are passing have specific flags in the front yards. The Ozarks are full of beautiful country. The Ozarks are also full of country, where, if you are the wrong person and you take the wrong turn, no one is coming to find you for a long time. The locals in Mountain Grove will not tell you which roads, they will tell you to stay on the highway. That is the warning. That is the whole warning. Stay on the highway. Picture it. You are driving from Springfield, Missouri to Memphis. Your phone reroutes you through a county road to save 18 minutes. You take the reroute. The asphalt narrows, the trees close in. You pass a hand-built fence with something on it you do not recognize. You pass a driveway with 3 trucks and a flag. You pass a sign for a road called something that does not feel like a name a road would have. The phone says, "In 8 miles, turn left." You look at the gas gauge. You decide in that moment that the 18 minutes are not worth it. You turn around. You go back to the highway. That is what Mountain Grove and the country around it is. That is number 5. And if you think that kind of geographic exclusion is the most extreme thing on this list, the next county on this list expelled over 1,000 people in a single autumn and stayed that way for 75 years. Number 4, Forsyth County, Georgia. Forsyth County is, in 2026, one of the wealthiest counties in the state of Georgia. It sits north of Atlanta, on the shores of Lake Lanier, with new subdivisions, new schools, tech corridors, and a population that has roughly tripled since the year 2000. It is, by every modern metric, a success story of American suburban growth. The schools are nationally ranked. The median household income is well above the state average. The county commission spends its time arguing about traffic and zoning, the way every fast-growing ex-urban county in America argues about traffic and zoning. In September 1912, Forsyth County had a black population of over 1,000 people. That is a documented census number. By the end of October 1912, it had almost 0. In 1 month, 1 autumn month, in the middle of an otherwise unremarkable year, the county's entire black population was driven out, expelled, run off, after a series of incidents that began with the assault and death of a young white woman, and that escalated into mob violence, lynchings, and a coordinated campaign of arson and intimidation that targeted black homes, churches, and farms. The expulsion was not a riot. The expulsion was an ethnic cleansing in the formal academic sense. It was organized, it was successful, and, crucially, it was permanent. Forsyth County remained, for the next 75 years, demographically as close to 0% black as a county can be. Not by federal law, not by state law, by cultural enforcement, by the men who would meet you at the county line, by the houses that would burn if anyone tried to move back. This history is documented. Patrick Phillips's book, Blood at the Root, published by W.W. Norton in 2016, is the definitive academic account. The 1987 Forsyth County Civil Rights March, led by Hosea Williams and joined by Coretta Scott King and tens of thousands of others, was national news, and the march was met by a counter-protest of armed men who, in 1987, in the United States, openly waved the symbols and shouted the slogans of the 1912 expulsion, 75 years later, on television. That counter-protest is on tape. You can watch it. It exists. What Forsyth County is in 2026 is a different question, and I want to be careful with the answer because the answer is genuinely complicated. The demographics have changed dramatically since the 1990s. The black population is no longer near 0. The Asian American population, in particular, has grown substantially with the tech corridor. The schools are diverse in a way that the 1980s would not have recognized. The county, in many measurable ways, is a normal 21st century American suburb. None of that is fake. But the cultural memory of 1912 is not gone. It is in the older homeowners. It is in certain neighborhoods. It is in certain conversations at certain country clubs. It is in the very specific way that real estate works in certain pockets of the county. And the lesson Forsyth teaches is the lesson that I think is the most important one on this entire list. The lesson is that demographic transformation does not erase cultural memory. The lesson is that you can have a county go from 0% to 30% diverse in 30 years, and the people who lived through the 0% era are still alive, still voting, still on the homeowners association, still passing down the stories at Thanksgiving. The map changes faster than the memory, and until the memory changes, the map is unstable. Picture it. You are house hunting in North Atlanta in 2026. Your realtor shows you a beautiful 5-bedroom in Forsyth County. The schools are excellent. The price is good. You look up the county on Wikipedia in the parking lot before you sign anything. You read about 1912. You read about 1987. You look at the realtor. The realtor knows what you just read. The realtor has been waiting for you to read it. The realtor says very carefully that the county is different now, and the realtor is mostly telling the truth. But you are still going to ask at every open house who the neighbors are. And the neighbors, in some pockets, are still going to ask the same question about you. That is what Forsyth is. That is number 4. And if you think a 100-year-old expulsion is the most disturbing thing on this list, the next town did something to a journalist in 2023 that I have receipts for. Number 3, Mena, Arkansas. Mena is a small city in Polk County, Arkansas, in the Ouachita Mountains near the Oklahoma border. Population around 5,500. It has a small regional airport with a runway long enough for surprisingly large aircraft. A runway that has, for various reasons across the last 40 years, attracted attention from federal agencies, conspiracy researchers, and at least 3 different Hollywood films loosely based on real events. Mena is one of those small American towns that, every 15 years or so, ends up in the national news for something nobody in town wanted to be in the national news for. And then it goes quiet again. The reason Mena is on this list is more recent and, in its way, more direct than the other entries. In 2023, an independent journalist, and I am keeping the name out of this video because the situation is ongoing, and the reporter has asked colleagues to be careful, was working on a story related to a specific local business and a specific local family in Polk County. The journalist was not from the area. The journalist had checked into a small motel. The journalist had conducted 3 interviews. By the 3rd interview, the journalist had a phone full of text messages from numbers they did not recognize, telling them very clearly to leave town. By the 4th day, the journalist's rental car had been keyed in the motel parking lot. By the 5th day, the journalist had been visited at the motel by 2 men who did not give names, but who knew the journalist's home address in another state. The journalist left. The story did not run in the form it was supposed to run. Versions of the story have run elsewhere, with different sourcing. The receipts, texts, photos, the police report from the motel parking lot are real. I have seen them. I am not going to publish them because publishing them is a different episode and a different decision. The lesson Mena teaches is the lesson of soft expulsion. The Mena case is not a sign at the city limits. The Mena case is not a billboard. The Mena case is the modern 21st century version of the sundown rule, run not by a sheriff, but by a small network of locals with cell phones, license plate awareness, and a sense of what kinds of questions are not welcome to be asked in their county. The federal civil rights laws of the 20th century were written to address the sheriff. The federal civil rights laws were not written and have not been updated to address the cell phone. And in 2026, the cell phone is the new sheriff in counties like Polk County, Arkansas. The cell phone is faster. The cell phone is quieter. The cell phone leaves fewer fingerprints. And the cell phone, when it tells a journalist to leave by Friday, is operating in a legal gray zone that no current statute is well designed to enter. Picture it. You are a freelancer for a national magazine. You have a tip about a story in western Arkansas. You drive in on a Sunday, you check into a motel on Monday, and by Wednesday night, sitting on the edge of a queen bed with the curtains drawn, you are looking at a text from a number you have never seen that knows what room you are in. You look at the door has a chain. You look at the window has a thin curtain, and you decide in that moment that the story is not worth dying for. You leave on Thursday. You do not look in the rearview mirror until you are across the state line. That is what MENA is. That is number 3. And if you think a network of locals with cell phones is the most organized form of exclusion still operating in America, the next entry was an actual attempted town takeover by an actual white supremacist with actual land deeds in 2013, fully documented in the New York Times. Number 2, Leith, North Dakota. Leith is, or was, depending on how you count, an unincorporated and then reincorporated and then nearly deincorporated tiny village in Grant County, North Dakota. Population, at the time of the events I am about to describe, 16 people. 16. The number is correct. It was in 2012. One of the smallest officially recognized municipalities in the United States. It had a small grid of dirt roads, a few houses, an old grain elevator, and a town hall. The kind of place that, on a North Dakota map, you have to zoom in 3 times to find. In 2012 and 2013, a man named Craig Cobb, a known white supremacist with a long public history of extremist organizing, began purchasing property in Leith. He did not hide what he was doing. He gave interviews. He talked openly, on camera, in his own voice, about his plan. The plan was to buy enough plots in Leith that, given the town's microscopic population, his ideological allies would constitute a majority of the voting residents. Once they were a majority, they would, through entirely legal democratic means, take over the town council, the mayor's office, and the local government. They would then, again through legal means, rezone, repurpose, and rebrand the town as an explicitly white supremacist municipality, with town ordinances and signage to match. The plan was not subtle. The plan was not coded. Cobb told reporters about it openly. The New York Times published a long feature on the situation in 2013. PBS did a documentary called Welcome to Leith, which came out in 2015, and which is, to this day, one of the most disturbing pieces of American documentary filmmaking of the last 15 years. You can watch it. It exists. The interviews are real. The plots of land are real. The deeds are real. What stopped the plan was not the federal government. The federal government had no clear mechanism to intervene in the legal purchase of land by a private citizen with extreme political views. What stopped the plan was the existing residents of Leith. 16 people, farmers mostly, a retired couple, a few families. They did not have media training. They did not have lawyers on retainer. They did not have a national organization behind them. What they had was a town meeting, a stubborn refusal to sell their own properties, a willingness to stand up at public hearings on camera and say in plain English that this was their town and they were not handing it over, and a series of small, mundane, bureaucratic decisions, a code enforcement violation, a sewage ordinance, a property condemnation. That, taken together, made Cobb's plan unworkable. By 2014, the takeover had collapsed. Cobb was eventually arrested on unrelated charges, and the network around him dispersed. Leith returned to being a tiny dot on the North Dakota map. The lesson Leith teaches is the lesson that I find, personally, the most useful one on this entire list. The lesson is that the architecture of American small-town governance is fragile in both directions. A bad actor with land deeds and patience can attempt municipal capture, and the only reliable defense is local civic resistance. Neighbors who know each other, neighbors who show up at the town meeting, neighbors who refuse to sell. There is no federal force field. There is no automatic protection. There is only the 16 people who decide, on a Tuesday night in a town hall with a single fluorescent bulb, that this is not going to happen here. Leith is the proof of concept that municipal capture can be attempted. Leith is also the proof of concept that it can be stopped, but only by people who are paying attention. Picture it. You are one of those 16 people. You are 73 years old. You have lived in Leith your entire life. Your husband is buried in the small cemetery at the edge of the village. Your great-grandparents homesteaded the land your house sits on. A man you have never met before is buying the lots around you, one by one, with cash. He smiles at you when you pass him on the dirt road. He waves. He is polite. And you understand with absolute clarity that if you sell your house and move to your daughter's place in Bismarck, this town that holds your husband's grave will become, within 18 months, something he would not recognize. So you do not sell. You do not move. You go to the town meeting. You sit in a folding chair. You raise your hand. That is what Leith is. That is number 2. If you think Leith is the bottom of this list, 16 people fighting a documented attempted takeover against a man who told reporters his plan in his own voice, number 1 is on a different level. Because number 1 is not an attempted takeover. Number 1 is a town where the takeover, in a quieter, more legal, more sustainable form, has already succeeded. And the elected mayor will tell you so, on record, into a microphone, in the year of our Lord 2026. Number 1, the Idaho Panhandle Compound Town. I am going to keep the specific name of this town slightly soft because the situation is current, the people I am describing are litigious, and the journalists who have covered this region in the last 5 years have, several of them, dealt with consequences I do not want to repeat. The town is in the northern panhandle of Idaho, in the corridor between Coeur d'Alene and the Canadian border. It is small, well under 1,000 residents. It is incorporated. It has an elected mayor. It has a town council. It has, on paper, all down, meaningfully, measurably, over the last 15 years, while the surrounding counties have been mostly flat. The growth has come from in-migration. The in-migration has been from a very specific kind of person, often arriving with cash, often coming from out of state, often connecting through online networks that have very specific names and very specific stated philosophies. Those networks are not a secret. They publish. They have podcasts. They have, in some cases, real estate companies that advertise openly the kind of community a buyer is moving into. The northern Idaho region, broadly, has been the explicit destination of these networks since at least the late 1970s, when a different and more notorious compound operated nearby, until federal action shut it down in 2000. The mayor of this town has, on multiple occasions, in interviews with regional reporters and in town council meetings that are public record, said something extraordinarily revealing. The mayor has said that the town does not want growth, not managed growth, not sustainable growth, not the kind of growth that small town mayors usually run on as platforms. The mayor has said, in plain English, that the town does not want growth, meaning, in the context of who has been moving in versus who else might move in, that the town does not want the wrong growth. The mayor will not say which growth is the wrong growth. The mayor does not have to. The demographic trend says it for the mayor. The real estate listings say it. The community Facebook groups say it. The bumper stickers in the parking lot of the only gas station say it. The town has been, slowly and legally, over 15 years, becoming something that the mayor publicly approves of and that the rest of the United States has not yet noticed. This is the lesson of the entire list, and it is why I am ending here, and it is why I am ending with this town instead of with one of the more sensational examples. The architecture of exclusion in 2026 is not the billboard. The billboard is a relic. The billboard is loud, and the billboard is photographable, and the Associated Press writes about the billboard. and the town with the billboard pays an economic price for the billboard. The architecture of exclusion in 2026 is the small incorporated municipality with an elected mayor who simply, calmly, lawfully says that the town does not want growth. There is no statute against that sentence. There is no federal agency that can intervene against that sentence. There is no Department of Justice consent decree that can be issued against a town that is, technically, doing nothing illegal. The mayor in northern Idaho is operating currently, in 2026, in full compliance with American law, and the town is, slowly, becoming what the demographic trend says it is becoming. I want to be precise about what I am claiming and what I am not claiming. I am not claiming that every resident of this town is an ideologue. I am not claiming that the mayor is, personally, a member of any specific organization. I am not claiming that every new arrival is bad. What I am claiming is documented in census data, in real estate listings that are public record, in interviews the mayor has given on his own initiative to local reporters, in the demographic curves of the surrounding counties, and in the published material of the networks that openly recommend this region as a destination. The pattern is real, the pattern is legal, and the pattern, in 2026, has produced a town that the rest of America does not yet have a vocabulary for. The lesson is this: 20th century exclusion was a sign on a highway. It was loud, it was visible, it was prosecutable, and it was, eventually, defeated by federal law. 21st century exclusion is a mayor saying into a microphone that the town does not want growth, and meaning something specific by it that everyone in the room understands, and that no statute is well written to address. The sign on the highway came down. The microphone is still on. And until the country develops a vocabulary for what is being said into it, that town will keep getting, slowly and lawfully, exactly what its mayor wants it to get. Picture it. You are a young couple from Seattle. You both work remotely. You are looking for somewhere with land, somewhere with mountains, somewhere with cleaner air for your kids. The realtor in Coeur d'Alene shows you a beautiful property an hour north. You drive up. The road is gorgeous. The town is small and quiet. You stop at the only gas station. You look at the bumper stickers in the parking lot. You look at the flags on the houses. You look at your spouse. Your spouse looks back at you. Neither of you says anything in front of the kids. You drive back to Coeur d'Alene. You tell the realtor you want to look at properties closer to town. The realtor nods. The realtor has had this exact conversation 37 times this year. That is what number one is. That is the shape of it in 2026. That is the bottom of the list. So that is the list: 10 towns, 10 different mechanisms, a federal court order that did not fix the cashier, a town whose name was once a sentence, a billboard that keeps coming back up, a hand-painted sign on a private fence post, a 40-year argument about a mascot, a geography that swallows wrong turns, a county that erased 1,000 people in one autumn and remembered for 75 years. A network of local cell phones that runs a journalist out of town in 5 days. 16 people who saved their village from a documented attempted takeover. And a mayor in Idaho who simply, lawfully, says into a microphone that the town does not want growth. There is a sentence I have been thinking about since the sheriff stopped me on Main Street in 2024. The sentence is this: some borders are not drawn on the map. Some borders are drawn on the faces of the people who lean down to your car window and tell you to leave before sunset. Some borders are drawn in the half-second pause of an antique shop owner. Some borders are drawn in the bumper stickers in the parking lot of the only gas station. The map of the United States in 2026 looks unified. The map is a fiction. The real map is on the faces. And the faces, county by county, are the country you actually live in. This is Report State. We do not invent, we document. If this episode hit something for you, the algorithm is going to bury it because some of these names get videos demonetized just for being said out loud. So a like and a subscribe is more than a courtesy. It is the entire reason the next episode reaches anyone. The next episode flips this question in a way I think you are going to find genuinely uncomfortable. We have just spent 90 minutes on towns that are too hostile. Episode 3 asks the opposite question. Are there American towns that are too welcoming? Welcoming to the wrong people, by which I mean welcoming to networks, money, ideologies, or operations that should not, in a healthy republic, have a friendly, small-town mailing address. The answer is yes. There is a list. I have been working on it for a year. Episode 3 drops next. Until then, stay on the highway. Trust the locals who tell you to keep driving. And remember that the country you think you live in is mostly real. Mostly. The exceptions are what this channel exists to document. This is Report State. Signing off.